Feel free Feel free to visit our YouTube or Facebook page. If you are not comfortable being recorded, simply keep your microphone and camera off. For the most enjoyable event for all involved, please mute yourself if you are not speaking. If you choose to enable your video, which we hope you all do, please make sure you are in a well-lit area free from distractions. You can enable and disable these features in the bottom left corner of your screen. Lastly, if you would like to connect with us at the IRC, please feel free to log on to our website at irckc.org, which will be available in the chat box. We encourage you to check it out if you are interested in joining as a member, receiving our newsletter, or exploring other upcoming events. Thank you again for joining us, and now let's get started and turn it over to Craig.
Hi, everyone. Great to meet all of you. This is a super exciting time for me. It's great to do some outreach and talk to people in the Kansas City area. And thanks so much to the IRC for having me come. So I'm just going to open up. I've got a PowerPoint, and I'm going to teach you all about ancient Greek today. So yeah, I'm excited. Let's get going. So, okay. So I'm Craig Jendza. I'm an associate professor of classics, and I teach at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas. And so really the first thing that I want to ask you guys is what comes to mind when I say ancient Greek language? You know, this is maybe a language you're not very familiar with. I know that it says Greek in it, so you know it has something to do with Greece, and it has ancient, so it's old. But what do you know already? What are your preconceptions? And feel free to just unmute and say hello if you've got anything to say.
Oh, Greg, it's nice to be here tonight.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for doing this. I have New Testament Greek. That's what I'm familiar with. I've done that. I studied that for about 2 years. So that's my background.
Nice. Anyone else? Of course, yeah, the New Testament is written in ancient Greek, a form of ancient Greek called Koine. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Anyone else have any experience or any awareness of ancient Greek? And if not, that's okay. You'll learn a little bit today, and that's good. Language of a great culture, Leah says. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, ancient Greece and Rome is the field called classics. So that's what I'm a professor of. Classics is the study of ancient Greece and Rome. And the reason why they're still studied today is because, you know, they've done a lot of things, right, that are very important historically and culturally. So what we're going to do today is talk a bit about the history of the Greek language from its earliest origins until now. We're going to learn the Greek alphabet, and we're going to look at ancient Greek's effect on English. A little tiny bit about ancient Greek grammar, just a few fun things, and then we're going to look at the opening to Homer's Iliad, so that way we can hear what it sounded like. So history of the Greek language. So Greek is one of the longest lasting continuously spoken languages that we have documented evidence for. So we're talking 1400 BCE, more or less, until present day, which is about 3,400 years of Greek. That is a very long time, 34 centuries. And some people actually think that Greek is the longest lasting continuously spoken language. There's some people that think Coptic Egyptian might be a little bit earlier, and some people think that Chinese might be a little bit earlier, but it depends on what you count and how you count it and things like that. What counts as continuously spoken, for example. As a comparison, you know, English, which is a very old language for sure, goes from Old English about 700, that should say CE, 700 CE, to modern English present day. That's about 1,300 years. So Greek is well over twice as long as English. Greek is a member of the Indo-European language family, and this is a very broad range of languages that are all connected. Here's an image of, I don't know, like a schematic, I suppose, of this language family. So basically the idea is there was this group of people called the Indo-Europeans. They were living about 5,000 BCE, thereabouts, 5 or 4,000 BCE. And they were living kind of in, modern day Turkey, somewhere in that area. And that as different people sort of broke off and left and migrated to different places, they ended up speaking these different languages because languages changed over time. And so the groups that went over down into India ended up speaking some Indo-Iranian languages, and the ones that went down to Greece ended up speaking Greek, etc. So just to give you some sense of this, I'm starting on the sort of left and working my way around. In the Balto-Slavic branch, there's Polish and Russian. In the Germanic branch, there's Icelandic, Swedish, English is there. So we're in this branch. German, obviously. Celtic is your Irish and your Welsh. Italic is Latin and anything deriving from Latin. So Spanish, French, Portuguese. Then we've got Albanian, Hellenic, that is our ancient Greek branch. So that's what we're doing today. Armenian, Anatolian, which is ancient languages in Turkey, like Hittite, and then Indo-Iranian and Tocharian. So really, we're talking a massive spread of languages, really ranging from China with Tocharian and India through this Indic, all the way up to, England, Celtic and things like that. So basically, this is the starting point, 5000 BCE. The time that we can actually see when Greek starts is 1450 BCE. So, and before this point, we have no idea really what happened. But we know that many massive things must have happened between those, 3,000-4,000 years. Our first form of Greek is something called Mycenaean Greek. It's a Bronze Age form of Greek. And this is written before the Greek alphabet was even invented. So this is something that was deciphered later on. And it's written in this linear B script. So if everyone can kind of look at this tablet here, this is a clay tablet that is written in a script. This is called the linear B script, and it's a very old form of ancient Greek. So the Mycenaeans were this group of Greeks that lived in Greece, and they had these palaces that when they were burned down when their civilization fell, all of the tablets that were inside, whatever they happened to be when they were burned, they just were basically like hardened and baked and fired. And so this is why we have thousands and thousands of these clay tablets, because this is what was in these palaces when they were burned. And so this is a tablet. It says 2 tripods. Aegis, the Cretan, brings them 2 tripods, 2 big 3-handled vases, 2 vases. It's very exciting stuff. Okay, it's just like a list of things. But when the very first scholars found these out of the ground, they were like, okay, looking at the end, we've got this thing that says like 2 vases. And you can see like these 2 tick marks at the end. That's the number 2. And then the thing before it looks like a vase. And so they're like 2 vases, I guess. But the rest of it was kind of hard to understand. They looked back earlier about halfway into the middle here, and they saw the same number 2, the 2 tick marks. And then they saw the symbol before the 2 tick marks that looks like a tripod. And so they were like 2 tripods. Okay. But then it took this really clever guy to decipher this, and he figured out that this was actually a form of ancient Greek that was like older than anything we had any awareness of, and it was written in this weird script that it was undecipherable. So this is one of the great like decipherments of the 20th century, and one of the greatest kind of linguistic achievements was the decipherment of linear B. After this, we can kind of go from this Mycenaean Greek to ancient Greek. This is the period that I mostly do, 800 to 323 BCE, more or less. This is written in the Greek alphabet. And so I'm going to teach you the alphabet in a second. This is the time of the great culture, the ancient Greek culture. Here are some authors who wrote in ancient Greek: Homer, Sappho, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, Herodotus, Plato, Aristotle. Basically all of the great Greek literature and philosophy and tragedy and poetry, things like that. After 323, that's when Alexander the Great died. We start a new period, and this is called Koine Greek or Common Greek. This is the language of the New Testament. So we started off saying that we're familiar with that. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, that's written in Greek. Other authors like Plutarch and Polybius and Marcus Aurelius, they're all writing in this Koine Greek. And then after that comes medieval or Byzantine Greek. 600 to 1453, that's the fall of Constantinople. That's the sort of arbitrary date that we say. That's the switcheroo. Some authors here are Procopius, Michael Psellos. And then after that point, we call modern Greek. So some authors here are Constantine Cavafy, a famous poet, Nikos Kazantzakis, he wrote Zorba the Greek, and George Seferis, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning author. So basically, this is a very long stretch of time, and there's a big difference between ancient Greek and modern Greek. So they're basically different languages. If you're a Greek speaker from Greece, you don't necessarily know ancient Greek. You have to take a class and learn it. And similarly, if you've learned ancient Greek, you don't necessarily know modern Greek. The alphabet's the same, but things are pronounced differently, and the grammar's changed a bit over time too, so you do have to kind of learn it a bit different. It's sort of like, we all know English, but Shakespeare is certainly a bit different. Middle English, like Chaucer, is quite a bit different, and Old English is almost incomprehensible. If you're trying to read Beowulf, it is very, very difficult. So that's kind of, brief history of the Greek language. So where was ancient Greek spoken? Shocker, it was spoken in Greece. And so here's a map where anything where you see color is a region where Greece was spoken. So obviously it's primarily in Greece in the center here, but notice also that the Greeks were this great seafaring culture, and they had sailed all throughout the Mediterranean and set up settlements. So we'll see things up in the Black Sea, on the northern coast of Turkey, on the island of Cyprus, down in Africa, Sicily, southern Italy, even over in France. So there were settlements kind of all over the place. And the other thing that we can see here from this map is differences in dialects. So ancient Greek was not a unified thing. There were different dialects. They were mutually intelligible. So you could, if you were from one region, you could understand Greeks from a different region, but they might have a funny accent to you, right? So it's kind of the way I think about this is that, so I'm from Massachusetts originally. And in Massachusetts, we have people from Boston, and they speak with the Boston accent. And so they say things like park the car in Harvard Yard instead of I park the car in Harvard Yard. And really the only difference is that it's the way they're pronouncing these R's, but the difference between us nowadays and them then is that they would actually spell it differently. So they wouldn't just speak it differently, they would actually spell the Greek words differently. So that makes it look a little bit different too. So it's pretty complicated. So Greek is actually really interesting in terms of its like history and development over time, but also in terms of its dialect as well. So here's the Greek alphabet. This is the alphabet that was invented around 800 BCE, more or less. It developed out of the Phoenician alphabet. The Phoenicians were great seafarers and great traders as well, and they really needed a great way of like keeping records of who sold what to who and how much money they got for it. And so the Greek alphabet developed out of that. So some of these letters you're probably familiar with already, actually. So let me sort of explain this chart. On the left-hand column, we have lowercase letters. So this column going down on the left is lowercase letters. This is an alpha. Then we have capital versions. We have upper and lowercase letters in our alphabet, so the same thing for them. So this thing that looks like an A is in fact a capital alpha. Then we have alpha, the word, the name of the letter, and then how it's pronounced. So it's pronounced like as in father. So you would pronounce the word alpha, alpha. Okay. The next letter is beta. And obviously we get our word alphabet out of alpha, beta, right? Because that's what it is. It's talking about the alphas and the betas and the gammas and all the rest of them. So beta is just a B, like the sound B. The next one is gamma, gamma. We have this, it's just a G sound, G, like in God. So we have things like gamma rays, gamma radiation. So some of these letters get used in, science and things like that. Delta is the next one. It's just a D sound. And nowadays we have coronavirus variants, COVID variants called the Delta variant, right? And so they're naming them after each of these different Greek letters. Also hurricanes. Hurricanes are now named after Greek letters as well. So for some reason we needed something neutral, and that'll do it, Greek letters. Epsilon is just an eh sound. It's an E sound like eh. Also, if you're familiar with like sororities and fraternities, you're probably familiar with some of these as well. Next is zeta, uppercase Z, and often that's pronounced like a z sound. This lowercase zeta is a bit squiggly and kind of a bit different. The next one is eta. It looks like an H, but it is not an H. It is an eta, and that's an A sound, like obey. Next up is theta, like a TH sound, like thing, th. Then we have iota, just the letter I. We actually have this word, if you say like, I don't give an iota, means I don't care a bit, I don't care a little bit, because it's just a little tiny letter. I, that's that sound. K, a kappa, it's just a K sound, looks like a K, that one's our friend. Then we have L, lambda, and mu, that's just L and M sounds, U, This next one's a little different. It's a nu, and the uppercase looks good, that looks like an N, but the lowercase one looks like a V, which can be confusing for my Greek students sometimes, at least at the beginning. I should say that when my students take ancient Greek, they are predominantly worried about the Greek alphabet. They're like, oh my God, it's written in a different alphabet. How can I possibly do that? But then after like 2 days, they've learned the alphabet completely fine, and they're able to read it and pronounce it and everything. So that's not the hard part about ancient Greek. It looks hard, but it's not that bad. Then after that, we have xi, the letter X, xi. Omicron just looks like an O, and that's okay. We have our favorite pi, 3.14. That's just a P sound. The other confusing one is probably rho, because it looks like a P, but it's an R. It's a rho sound, rho. Sigmas, an S sound. Taus with a T sound, t. Upsilon, that's just the letter U. And then phi, chi, and psi, PH, CH, and PS. And then rounding it out is omega. So we've now gone from the alpha to the omega. Okay, so this is our Greek alphabet. This, as I said, it was developed out of the Phoenician alphabet, but then from this, we've got our Latin alphabet, the alphabet we use developed out of this. Also other alphabets like Cyrillic that's used to write like Russian, for example. They all developed out of this Greek alphabet. So how has ancient Greek affected English? So about 5% of our English words, of our entire language, is derived from ancient Greek. And I think that's crazy. That's a really high percentage. And sometimes it affects words that you don't even think about. I've got this broken into vernacular borrowings, like regular everyday words, and then learned borrowings, fancy words. So our word butter comes from the Greek word bouturon, which literally means cow cheese, which is the funniest thing I've ever heard. So they saw this and they're like, what are we going to call this? Cow cheese. I don't know. Then lamp just comes from the Greek word lampos. And so those are just clear borrowings. They didn't have a word for, in English, we might not have had a word for lamp, for example. And so we just took the ancient Greek word for lamp. And then they're learned borrowings. These are words that basically people in the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th centuries, when they wanted to come up with a new term, they would basically pull a word from ancient Greek to give it like a sense of authority, or they would just pull even just word roots. So here's some words like democracy comes from the Greek word demokratia, or physics comes from the Greek word ta physika, physics. Even our coronavirus, our corona word comes from the Greek word korone, which just means a garland or a wreath or a crown. And so the reason why it's called this is that the coronavirus, when you look at it under a microscope, it seems to have like a halo or a crown around it. And so that's why they call them coronaviruses. Or even things like telephone. So when they invented a telephone, they're like, what are we going to call this thing? And they're like, well, what does it do? Well, you can hear sounds far away. And so they just took the word for far and the word for sound from ancient Greek, telephone, and they just smushed them together and made up a new term. Obviously, the word telephone did not exist in ancient Greece because they did not have telephones. So this was their way of kind of taking roots and just kind of smushing them together to just make up a new word. Okay, so this is some words that come from Greece, but there's obviously lots and lots more. So now what I'm going to do is take away our English letters and see if we can take a stab at pronouncing these words. And I'll give you a hint on this slide. They are all from Greek mythology. They're all from Greek mythology. So if anyone knows the gods or anything like that, that would be very helpful. Does anyone think they could take a stab at pronouncing that first one? And I will help you out. I will help you out so much.
I will if nobody else will.
Claire, thank you so much.
I have a feeling it's Zeus.
It is Zeus.
Okay.
That is exactly right.
All righty.
Yes, good. And so you got the Z, and that looks like an E. That's eh. That looks like a U. Zeus. Yeah, that's Zeus. Or how about this next one? It's another Greek god.
I'll try it.
Yeah, try it.
Okay, Poseidon.
Poseidon. Yeah, that's it. So notice we start off with a pi. Poseidon. Okay. And then there's this third one. And it starts with a capital delta. So that's a D. Anyone think they could do that one?
But Dionysus?
Dionysus. Yeah, that's right. Dionysus. And then the fourth one, this is a goddess of love and beauty.
Aphrodite.
Aphrodite. Very nice. This fifth one starts with a kappa. So it starts with a K. And this is a monster with only one eye.
Cyclops.
Cyclops, nice, that's it. In ancient Greek, it's kuklos. Kuklos, and literally what it means is circle eye. So his name literally just means, the word kukol means like cycle, it means like a circle, and then ops means eye, like optometry or something like that. And then the last one is a Greek hero, a famous Greek hero.
Achilles.
Achilles. Yeah, nice. Achilles. Good. So not so bad with these, right? Claps for everyone for that one. So even so, like the Greek alphabet's not that bad. Like you've been doing this for about 12 seconds and you already could figure out 6 names. So some words actually are exactly the same as our English words. We literally in English just took the word from ancient Greek and just kept it. Okay. So here's a bunch of words. Most of them end in ma. Anyone think they can figure this first one out? Aroma. Or good, aroma. So remember that this one, the second letter is, it looks like a P, but that's a rho. Okay, so aroma. This next one starts with a delta again with a D.
Dilemma.
Dilemma, nice. Dilemma. Good. How about this one? It starts with a DI again.
Diploma.
Diploma, good. Which is what you're going to get at the end of this session today, in ancient Greek diploma. You won't actually, I apologize for misleading you. And then how about this one?
Drama.
Drama, yes, good, drama. Or I always like going to the movies or
Cinema.
Cinema, yeah. Kinema, which literally just means moving things. Remember the old term for movies is like the moving pictures, right? So kinema means the moving things. How about the next one?
Plasma.
You guys are really good at this. Plasma, good. How about this one? starts with a sigma, so an
Stigma.
S. Stigma,
Stigma.
stigma, good. If you've got a lot of musicians, you might be in one of these.
Orchestra.
An orchestra, nice, orchestra. And if you're a honeybee or some other animal such, you might like this. It's a tough one. Nectar. Yeah, nectar. Yeah, nectar. Remember, that's the thing. That's a new that looks like a V, but it's actually an N. Good. So all of these are just words that we've just taken the words exactly out of ancient Greek and pulled it over into English. And then sometimes, you know, we switch it around a little bit, you know, it'll have a different ending, but it'll keep the same root, you know, that kind of thing. So here's my favorite shape. This is my favorite shape. This is a hexagonon or a hexagon. When I watch my dramas, I often do it here.
Theater.
A theater, good. Yeah, a theater. It says theatron. Or my favorite subject in school. Yeah.
History.
Yeah, history. Yeah, history. All of these are ancient Greek words, history, theater. Obviously, we get, you know, they were the founders of history and drama and things like that. This next one, again, another math term. P-E-R-I.
L-E-E-R-O-N.
Perimetron.
What is?
Perimeter.
Oh, okay.
A perimeter. And then skeptic, skeptikos, philosophia, and graphikos, so graphic. So this just kind of illustrates a couple of other terms, and these are a little bit different because you have to, you know, massage it to make it work, but you know, we get these words out of it too. And just on this last word, graphikos, this comes from a Greek root graph, and it means to write, just like to write. And just to give you an illustration of how extensive our words that come from a Greek root can be, here's just a very small partial list of all of the words that you can make out of that root graph. So just our word graph, right? Our word graph is a thing that you can write out. An autograph is a, when you write your own name, right? You're autographing something. We've got words like graphic or graphite. Graphite is a substance that you use to write with. Biography, a writing down of your life. A photograph, where you're writing through light. That's how they're thinking of a photograph. You're like writing it down through like taking light waves of it. Bibliography, writing down of books. Biblio, books. Geography, writing down of land. Or a seismograph, the thing that measures earthquakes, is a things that writes down shakings. The Greek word seismo means shakings or like quakes. So, and I could have gone on for like another, I don't know, 30 or 40 or 50 words here, but I only have time for a little bit. Okay. So yeah, so Greek is very pervasive in English for sure. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about ancient Greek grammar, just a little bit, just to give you a taste of what it looks like. And specifically, I'm going to teach you guys about the case system. Okay. So this is basically, it's a different system for the structure of the language. So English uses word order and prepositions to show the relationship between words. Things like an everyday sentence, like we'd all say, "Oh, Dionysus, Philip is fighting a wolf in the farmer's field." We all say that every day. So how do you know that Philip's fighting the wolf and not the wolf fighting Philip? Well, there's the word order. Things have to be in a certain word order in English. Greek uses a different system. It's called a case system, and they use noun cases to show the relationship between words. What this means is they put specific endings on the words, and those endings will mean grammatical things. They'll give grammatical information to you. So basically what this means is that there's different cases, and they'll show things like the subject or possession or location or things like that. So basically when you're learning Greek, you're not so much learning word order, but you're learning a series of endings, and then those endings will help tell you, oh, that word's the subject, or that word's the direct object, or something like that. So just to give you a sense of that stupid sentence that I made up, oh, Dionysus, Philip is fighting a wolf in the farmer's field. Each of those nouns would be in a different case in Greek. So Philip is the subject, that would be in the nominative case. The farmers shows possession, that would be in the genitive case. In the field, that would be location, the dative case. Wolf is the direct object of the verb, and that goes into the accusative case. And if you're talking to Dionysus, which we all do, then you would put that into the vocative case and basically just put different endings on it. And so if you wanted to say this in ancient Greek, you would just kind of put those endings onto the words, and then that tells you everything you need to know. So it looks like this: O Dionyse, O Philippos, Makatai, ton lukon, to agro, to auturgu. And each of those words has a different case, a different ending on it to show whether it's the subject or the direct object or whatever. Now, if I were teaching you for real, then I'd make you learn all of these endings because that's super important. But for us, I just want you to kind of get the gist of that like this is how Greek goes about doing it. So if this is how they do it, does word order matter at all? Well, the answer is kind of yes, but kind of no. So quite literally, I could rearrange all of the words put them in any order, and it would mean the same thing. The only thing that would change is that you could emphasize certain things by putting them at the front. So if I wanted to have the sentence and really focus on the fact that, like, oh my God, it's a wolf that Philip is fighting in the field, then I might want to take that word wolf and kind of pop it up to the front of the sentence. And that way, like, the first word you hear is like the important focused word, the emphasized word, but I don't need to do that. I can just kind of have them in any order and it'll mean the same thing as long as I've got those case endings there, if that kind of makes sense. I know I'm kind of talking about something sort of like complicated in like a minute, but I think you guys get the idea. And then I think the last thing I want to do, because I know we have limited time, is I want to look at this passage from Homer's Iliad. So Homer's Iliad is a big epic poem. It's about the Trojan War, and specifically the rage of this hero Achilles and how it led to kind of his downfall. And so Homer is writing poetry, and it's in a certain meter, right? So as you know, poetry is written in meter. And so this is written in a meter called dactylic hexameter. Hexameter means there's 6 feet. And what dactylic means is that it can either be a dactyl, which is a long, short, short, or a spondy, which is a long, long. So you'll have these sequences of long, short, short, or long, long, and that'll be kind of how it goes. So let me read this. This is just the first 7 lines of the poem in ancient Greek, and you'll kind of hear the flow of it. So as you're listening, try to like hear the long, short, shorts or the long, longs. Me nena thea peleia do akaleos, ulomene ne muria kaio salga etheka, polas difthi muspsu kasaidi proiapsen, aero onau tuste eloria teukecunesin, oion noisi tapasi diosta teleia tobule, exu de ta prota diaste tain erisante, atre ides ta anaxandron kai dios Achilles. So that's kind of how it goes. So it's kind of got this nice ebb and flow to it, right? You can kind of feel how it would, I don't know, soothe you, right? It's kind of got this nice flow to it. In fact, one time I saw a performer read this in Greek. He was very, very good at this. And about 3 minutes into it, there were like babies in the audience that were crying. And like 3 minutes into it, they were all like lulled to sleep because of that, like the flow of it. It was really interesting to see. And the other thing that's very interesting about it is that they try to vary it up. So no two lines in a row will have the same sequence of dactyls and spondees. They always try to switch it up to vary it, so that way you get this kind of varying sing-song kind of thing. And so this is just the first bit about Achilles' rage. You can see black and murderous, cost the Greeks incalculable pain, pitched countless souls of heroes into Hades' dark. This is very epic and serious, and left their bodies to rot as feasts for dogs and birds as Zeus's will was done. Begin with the clash between Agamemnon, the Greek warlord, and godlike Achilles. So that's the opening of the Iliad. I think I'm gonna kind of pause and have that be it for my stuff that I'm going to talk about, and then see if you guys have any questions. I can talk for all day about ancient Greek. So yeah, what sorts of questions do you guys have?
I have a question about pronunciation.
Yeah.
That's kind of a tricky thing, isn't it? I mean, where do you get your source for the pronunciation? Have you not heard it in the original Greek?
Yeah, so how we've reconstructed the pronunciation of ancient Greek is actually very complicated. It involves a lot of like close linguistic analysis of things like dialectal errors. And so we can actually look at the inscriptions of people who've written things down at various points in time, and based on the types of mistakes they make, we can actually say, oh, that this sound must have been pronounced by like this in this particular time period. There's also this longstanding tradition of, it is continuously spoken over 3,400 years. So there is a longer standing tradition of how this thing has been recorded. So it's kind of two different ways of doing it. Yeah, what else?
So you showed us a bunch of words that English had that came from ancient Greek. Are those words similar in modern Greek?
Yeah, so ancient versus modern is in some ways similar and in some ways not. So one of the big differences between ancient and modern Greek is that the letters are pronounced slightly differently. So they do still have a lot of the same vocabulary words, but they might be pronounced a little bit differently. So something like demokratia, the word for democracy, they would pronounce that demokratia, because there is a sound change in the pronunciation between eta, where it used to be an A sound, and now it's an E sound. So things like that happen a lot, and a lot of the vocab has stayed the same, but the grammar has changed. So for example, the case system that I was just talking to you guys about is vastly simplified. It's not quite so hard as having all of those different cases.
I know there's a lot of kind of recent research about the origins of Homer himself.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I can. So for a very long time, everyone thought that Homer was a guy, was a human being that wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, these two long epic poems. The Iliad's about Achilles' rage during the Trojan War. The Odyssey is about Odysseus, one of the Greek heroes, his return home. This was back in the 1800s that everyone was kind of worried about this. And then in the 1930s, this scholar named Milman Parry discovered that actually what's going on is that there was no guy named Homer. This was a bunch of bards, oral poets, that had basically been, for hundreds of years, been practicing this craft of oral poetry. So basically the idea is that there was no guy that wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. Instead, it was that oral poets over hundreds of years had learned the skills to like produce it, generate it on the spot, which is kind of interesting. So we think about these things as, having epic poetry, oral poetry kind of connotations to it, not like there was a single guy that did it. What other questions do you have?
So if there were oral poets, when was it first put to the page, written page?
That is an excellent question. So think about it like this. There were oral poets that kind of like had these stories and they were going around town telling them. At a certain point in time, they were actually, it kind of became like solidified to a certain extent, where everyone kind of did it the same sort of way. And then once writing was invented, they decided that they wanted to record this. And so they basically wrote down what the bards were doing. It's a little unclear, and we can't quite figure out whether this is sort of like a version of it, the best version, or it's a sort of composite. A lot of scholars, classical scholars, are trying to figure this sort of thing out about how exactly this all works. But regardless, the picture of there's an author who wrote it, that's gone. And then instead we have a more complicated issue of there's oral poets, bards who are reciting this and they're composing it. And then at some point it gets written down, and then eventually it becomes solidified into the version we've got today.
What period did it get written down?
So it first got, the oral poetry stuff was happening between, say, 1200 and 800 BCE. Our first version that was written down was probably about 500 BCE, and it became solidified around 300 BCE. And our first manuscripts are dated to about, I think, 1st century CE, which is actually very good for ancient manuscripts. Normally, very often we only have like a single manuscript. Here we have many, many hundreds. So that's actually really good. So this is about as steadfast and good of a process as we've really got for ancient manuscripts. We're quite sure about this one. Yeah, other questions or other thoughts?
I could just ask you one more thing. Where do you think the idea that Homer was blind came from?
Oh, okay. So this is really interesting. So there's this idea that Homer was a blind poet. And the reason why people think this is because in Homer's poems, there is a bard. So there's a bard who is singing songs, and this bard happens to be blind. And so basically the idea was that because Homer wrote about a blind bard, that he too must have been a blind bard. And if you think about the logic of that, that is ridiculous, right? There's no reason why you write, including a character, means that you are also that same thing. He also wrote about heroes. No one ever said that he was a hero, So that's why that came from. It's because of a detail of a particular character within Homer's writings. Yeah.
So the information from like Plato and Aristotle, was that actually written down, or was that oral also?
That was written down. So really, most of the people that I had there are normal human beings. It's only Homer that's different. So all of those people were, they were authors just like in our normal sense. They were people that sat down and wrote things down. Plato, Aristotle, so those philosophers, they were totally people that wrote things down. They wrote down their philosophy. This only applies to the Homer.
When was the Septuagint written down? The Septuagint.
The Septuagint. So that was written down, I think, 1st and 2nd century CE. So basically, once the New Testament had been written down in Greek, that was the original language it was written in. These Greek Christians wanted to read the Hebrew Bible. They wanted to read the Old Testament, and they couldn't. And so they commissioned a group of 70 people. The Greek word Septuagint means 70. So they commissioned 70 like Greek and Hebrew scholars to translate it. And so this was their effort, was the Septuagint. Yeah.
Okay, if nobody has any more questions, I think we have run out of time. I'm gonna paste a little message in the chat box that will go over some information on our contact info and donations. But thank you, Craig, for this really interesting lesson. I feel like I learned a lot in such a short amount of time. And thank you also to all of our discussion participants and those who zoomed in. We appreciate your time and willingness to join us for this conversation. I'd also like to close by putting a plug in for some of our upcoming events. In particular, tomorrow's International Film Club at 7 p.m., going over the movie He Even Has Your Eyes. Another Lexicon event happening on Wednesday at 7 p.m., learning Dutch. A partner program with the Linda Hall Library happening on Thursday at 6 p.m., and our International Career Series taking place on Friday at noon. All of these events will take place on Zoom. And if you're interested in them and any other IRC programs, we encourage you to check out our website for more information at irckc.org. There you can also find a link to our YouTube channel where you'll be able to find a full recording of this conversation if you'd like to revisit it. If nobody has any closing remarks, thank you so much for being here again. Please stay well, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, everyone.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, it's about film club tomorrow. Is it initially it was only going to be in person? Is it still in person or is it going to be online now?
It looks like Claire maybe froze. I will. Deanie, could you send me your email address and I'll find that information for you and send it to you.
Yeah.
Claire definitely froze. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Well, Craig, thanks so much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
No problem.
Claire wished she was here to sign off. This is very enjoyable for me, actually. That's awesome. Yeah, my only exposure was with Koine Greek as well. And so this is really interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, and I used to teach English and in Korea, and there was a huge thing I tried to emphasize with my students was when they were learning English, they were actually learning these little bits and pieces from all these different languages that have kind of melted in together. So anyways, it was very interesting. Thank you so much. Hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so much.
Take care, Craig. And Deanie, thank you. I got your email address there, and I will ask Evan. Evan is the one leading or I think actually Matthew is in the discussion tomorrow.
Matthew. Matthew usually does it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's a huge film buff. But anyways, I will copy this, and I will. Someone will contact you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deanie. Take care.
You too. Bye.